initiating a very large new viewing audience into the sport, and you're right there in the thick of it. Before I get to my last question for you, Gaurav, let me ask you the follow-up question that I had is, how do you sort of measure? What are you looking at? What are the metrics you're looking at? The soft ones, the hard ones. How do you measure the success of your partnership, for instance, with F1 Aston Martin? What are you looking at?
Yeah, and Dilshad, the honest truth is, I've got a weekly Excel sheet that comes to me that has 56 row items, right? Items on a row, and each one of them measures those little indicators that you talked about that make a difference, right? Right from website traffic, for example, to social sentiment and all of those elements. But what everything, the efficacy of our press releases, the efficacy of our internal communications and all of those elements, how many views do we have, how many engagements do we have, all of that is being measured. But at the highest level, irrespective of whether it's F1 or a largely social-led campaign, a digital campaign around data modernization or whatever it is, we try to measure things in a similar way, because I want that predictability. Look, I mean, the average CEO, the average business owner has sales numbers, has, you know, cost numbers, has so many things to worry about. If you make the marketing analytics too complicated, he or she is going to get very quickly lost in that. So it's what is that one number that matters. For a B2B business, right, I can't talk about marketing source pipeline because at the end of the day, there is nothing transactional about my business whatsoever. Every element of my business is a B2B element. Every sale that I do is B2B. So we measure something called marketing influence pipeline and marketing influence revenue. And the way we measure it is we take 9 months prior and 9 months post. So with that target audience that we're targeting, whether it's a digital campaign or whether it is invites to the Miami race to these 10 clients, we look at our footprint with them 9 months prior, 9 months post, and we measure the revenue prior and post, right? That's one element. We measure the margins, because the hospitality in something like F1 allows me to have a richer conversation with my clients around value-added services, around digital transformation services, and elements like that, generative AI and conversations like that, that I can sell maybe for higher margins, right? So you have a conversation that's centered around how much of a revenue impact did you have? How much of a margin impact do you have? But for the client side, everything rolls up to that notion of marketing influence, pipeline and revenue.
And we're also seeing a lot of CEOs, executives across the board talking about the new bottom line, which is people, planet, profits. And so let me just ask you how, from a marketer's vantage, how you've seen that change in terms of also connecting your brand purpose to business outcomes, to those profits, to make a better argument for all those other initiatives that you're doing to make the world a better place.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dilshad. I think, Dilshad, sustainability is one element of those.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Because this notion of good growth, which is, you know, which is being driven now, which is, you can't achieve growth at any and all costs. You have to achieve growth with the right elements, which is inclusion, which is sustainability and the climate and all of those. In fact, our CEO, Ravi Kumar, he did a fascinating panel at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and the entire panel was focused on this notion of good growth and how should corporations and governments, you know, work hand in hand from a regulation standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, and all of those elements to ensure that everybody is looking at good growth as opposed to growing just for the sake of growing. It's a fascinating conversation, right? At some point in time, the stock markets are also going to come. Today, they're not there. Stock markets are still after profitability, revenue, growth, those elements. And I think they will catch up. But it is fascinating. I think marketing plays a huge role in communicating that. And I'll give you a really simple example. Growing up, right? And 5 years ago, not even growing up, but 3 years ago, F1 was considered, oh, F1 is a very non-sustainable sport and it's not a great sport or anything to that effect. And it always had this dark cloud over it, right? The amount of tires you use, the petrol you use, all of that kind of stuff. What's interesting?
People traveling the world.
People traveling the world with all of that equipment all over. What's fascinating is there are now strict mandates for every team in F1 around both sustainable fuels and carbon neutrality, right? And we are helping the Aston Martin team achieve the goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. So that's just one example in an area that's, like I said, always had a dark cloud around it. And the reason we do that is because we genuinely believe, one, it's a great thing for the world, but it's important for us as a company too to partake in making this world a better place.
You're seeing there, for instance, technology really powering meaningful progress and growth. And well, on that note, thank you so much for your time, Gaurav. It was lovely chatting with you, and hope F1 has a good season.
I hope so too. I hope Aston Martin has a
Yes,
great season. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav.